Good evening. I'm Louise Perez, a board member of the League of Women Voters of Larchmont Mamaroneck and a vice president of the Westchester League. I would like to welcome all of you to our candidate forum for Senate District 37. We are pleased that both candidates for our Senate district are participating tonight. The League is happy to offer this forum as an opportunity for the community to hear directly from the candidates who seek to serve this important state office. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which promotes political responsibility through the informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League is nonpartisan in that it does not support or oppose any candidate for public office. It is political in that it takes positions on selected governmental issues after serious member study and consensus. We are fully committed in principle and in practice to the National League's policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are very pleased this evening to partner with Disability Rights New York to provide closed captioning in Spanish and English, as well as ASL translations. To see the closed captions, you can click on the 3 dots button on your toolbar labeled More, choose Captions, and Show Captions. And you can also choose View Full Transcript to see the transcript in a window on the side. Alternatively, by going to the StreamText website link, which is displayed on the screen, and you can view the closed captioning access StreamText in your web browser. From there, you will be able to get live captions in Chinese, English, Korean, Portuguese, and Spanish. I would like to recognize the other local leagues: New Rochelle, Northeast Westchester, Rye, and Portchester, Scarsdale, and White Plains, who are co-sponsoring tonight's forum. And I would like to welcome our timekeeper, Sophia Alexandru, a senior at White Plains High School. Lastly, I welcome our moderator, Marcia Brewster. Ms. Brewster is a member of the League of Women Voters of the River Towns. She is also president of the United Nations Association Westchester chapter and is an experienced league moderator. We're very pleased to have her with us this evening. And with that, I'll turn the program over to Ms. Brewster.
Thank you for the introduction, and good evening to our candidates and to our viewers. It's a pleasure to be here. In accordance with league policy, I am not a voter in this district. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few ground rules. The order of opening statements has been determined by lots that were drawn before the meeting. The order of closing statements will be in the reverse order as the opening statements. The order in which candidates will respond to questions will be rotated by the moderator to assure fairness. Throughout the forum, no comments of a personal or abusive nature will be permitted. The moderator will rule this out of order. Each candidate has 1.5 minutes to make their opening statement. The timekeeper will indicate when 30 seconds remain in the allowed speaking time, and again when the time is up. Questions from the audience were submitted prior to candidates night by email and electronic form. The audience will not be able to submit questions during the live event. These questions have not been shared with the candidates prior to this evening's forum. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Each candidate will be allowed up to 2 rebuttals during the event. A candidate may raise their hand to indicate they would like to use the rebuttal. Rebuttal time will be 30 seconds. There will be no responses to rebuttals. At the conclusion of the question period, each candidate will give a closing statement of a maximum of 1.5 minutes. As moderators, As moderator, I will reserve the right to allow an additional rebuttal of the close if warranted by the content of the closing statement. Such a rebuttal would be given 30 seconds. Now we will proceed with the forum. We have two candidates for the position of Senator for District 37 of New York State. In alphabetical order, your candidates are Shelley Mayer, Democrat and Working Families, and Frank Murtha, Republican candidate. We will begin with their opening statements. We have already chosen from the hat, and Mr. Frank Murtha will be first. You will each have up to 1.5 minutes to make an opening statement. Mr. Frank Murtha, you have the floor.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Frank Murtha. I'm running for State Senate in Westchester County. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters and my opponent for participating in this important forum. A little bit about me. I was born and raised here in Westchester. I've spent most of my life here. I don't have a background in politics. My background is in psychology, education, and business. I have a doctorate from SUNY Buffalo in counseling psychology, and for the last 2 decades, I've specialized in working with people around the psychology of personal finance. Now, one of the things about being trained as a psychologist is that it trains you to work with people of all different types, and it also trains you to listen, specifically to listen with what we call empathy and unconditional positive regard. And I think that's actually a great framework for approaching representing the people as well. But mainly, I really just think of myself as a dad. I'm raising 2 kids, and that's why I'm running. I have watched policy from Albany make their lives worse. Our streets are not as safe as they need to be. Our cost of living is too high, and these things are driving people right out of the state. And also, our kids are not getting the education they deserve. My priorities are simple: your safety, your wallet, and your kids' education. There are other important issues, of course, but that's where my priorities lie. And I will work with anybody on either side of the aisle to improve positive change in those areas and others.
Thank you, Mr. Murtha. Senator Shelley Mayer, you may proceed.
Well, thank you very much to the League for the opportunity to appear before you and make the case for why I am the best candidate for the State Senate for the 37th Senate District. First, I have a record of accomplishment in Albany. For the last 4 years, I've chaired the State Senate Education Committee. Under my leadership, after years of advocates fighting for it, we finally delivered record funding for every single school district in the state. I've been a leader on the effort to combat gun violence, to address flooding and climate change, to expand voting rights, to ensure we have an economy with good jobs, and to make sure the right to abortion is protected here in New York State. I've been a public supporter of a criminal justice system that is fair and just, and that ensures public safety. Second, I know every community in my district. Day and night, I'm out meeting with folks in every town and village and city I represent, from Yonkers, where I live, to White Plains, to North Castle, to Eastchester, to Bedford, and everywhere in between. After Hurricane Ida, I walked through neighborhoods, helping people get the coverage they deserved. I'm committed to helping individuals. I work for the people, and I've done that my entire life. I only earn your trust by my hard work, commitment to active listening to all opinions with an open mind, understanding that making government work takes knowledge, persistence, and skill. I'm proud to work with hospital workers, Teamsters, teachers and business people, lawyers and house cleaners. We are one diverse community that can and must live and work together.
Thank you, Senator Meyer.
When we work together. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we are going to proceed to the question and answer period. Each candidate will be given an opportunity to answer each question, and we will rotate who answers first. You will each have up to 1.5 minutes to respond. And the first question, if you could accomplish only one thing as an elected representative for SD 37, what would it be? Senator Mayer.
Well, it's a tough question, but I think as chair of the Education Committee and assuming if I win and I am able to continue in that role, I want to continue to fight for education for every child. And that is the full panoply of what education means, from childcare to full day pre-K to quality education, including mental health services, arts, music, after school, and moving on to post 12th grade education. There is a whole lot of change and improvement we need in our system, particularly after COVID. I'm very committed to working with every teacher, superintendent, and every parent to achieve a result that is worth the investment we are making. We are putting lots of money in, but we need to make sure that we are both hearing from people in the field and delivering real results. That's what I've been able to do to date, getting over $2 billion in foundation aid, which is the basis of how the state pays schools. It could not be paid for many years. We had a bitter fight. We won that fight. And I intend to continue to fight for every child, because a public education is the greatest opportunity we have. And I intend to make that work for every child, whether they live in Portchester or they live in Scarsdale.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murtha.
Yes, obviously there are so many important things. For me, I would focus on public safety. It is the most fundamental duty of a government to provide for the public safety of the people. Without that, you don't have anything. And I think that Albany has taken their eye off the ball on this issue. Look, we have a problem right now. I'll give you an example. I have a friend, his name's Tom Fix. He's running for assembly. He's a great guy. He owns a hardware store. He has never seen shoplifting and crime like this in his life. We are all dealing with not just public safety issues, but also quality of life issues. A major reason is the cashless bail that was implemented by my colleagues, or pardon me, future colleagues perhaps, on the Democratic side of the aisle. We're releasing dangerous criminals and creating a revolving door of crime. Look, if people don't feel safe leaving their home, going to the store, doing the basic things, what kind of quality of life do you have? And this is one of the issues that are driving people out of the state in record numbers. So, there's a lot of things to work on, but I think we should start with the basics, with common sense, and focus on that.
Thank you very much. Now on to the second question.
Excuse me, I had my hand raised for rebuttal.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Senator Mayer.
Yes, thank you. Very briefly, we could have a longer conversation, and we should, about the changes we made in bail and discovery to reflect fundamental inequities in the system that were based on wealth. But that being said, having heard from my constituents, my police departments, my police commissioners, with my colleagues, we have made 2 substantive changes, including addressing shoplifting in the bail law. And I happen to believe we should make additional changes going forward. But to simply say that the bail law changes that we made for nonviolent and low-level crimes is the cause of all the crime that we clearly have a problem with is inaccurate and does not make sense.
I think there is not a response to the rebuttal. Mr. Murtha, you can rebut after she speaks in the response to the question. Okay. Now to the second question. Do you support allowing voting by absentee ballot without an excuse? Why or why not? And Mr. Murtha, you begin.
I don't have a strong opinion on this. What I do know is that when it comes to our elections, there are 2 very important issues. One is making sure that the elections are free and that they're fair and that everybody has good access to the polls. And I support measures that would make that the case. The other is that we preserve election integrity and make sure that we can trust the results of these elections. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have seen enough people disputing elections for a lifetime. It's a major problem and it's unnecessary. We need to make sure that we're doing the right things on this issue. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to trust our democracy. As far as the absentee ballots, I think that it is best for people to vote in public, and we should make it as easy as possible to do that. This is something we share. This is something that brings us together as a community. As long as you have a reasonable reason for not being able to get to the poll, by all means, take advantage of it. I've spoken to a lot of seniors. I know this is important to them. There are people who are away. but this is not a priority for me. What I want to make sure is we have free, fair elections and election integrity.
Thank you very much. Senator Mayer?
Well, one, I strongly support the ability to cast an absentee ballot without an excuse. Many states, including states that have conservative governments and Republican governors, have absentee ballots without excuse. I've been a strong supporter of it, and particularly during COVID, where we have passed a law to extend it and say that the fear of COVID is a grounds for absentee ballot. It turned out that there was a substantial increase in turnout once you give people the opportunity to seek an absentee ballot. Our conference, the Senate Democratic majority, has greatly expanded the franchise early voting, which the Republicans never allowed when they were in control. Many other kinds of opportunities for people to cast a ballot, pre-registration for 17-year-olds, which I strongly support. We need more people voting, not fewer people voting, and we should open up the franchise by allowing absentee voting without a reason, obviously subject to the rules of the Board of Election and the State Board of Election. And that is the way that more people will participate. The whole goal of elections, and those of us who are out there campaigning know this, is to get people to actually cast a ballot and make sure their voice is heard, whatever they decide.
Thank you very much. The next question, what is your proposal for addressing the economy and rampant inflation? Senator Mayer, you begin.
Well, let's be honest. The rampant inflation is an international problem across the United States and the Western world. It is a very challenging one. What we can do at the state level is a series of things, some of which we started. I was a fighter for the gas tax holiday before we left in June. That was a way to minimize the impact of the tax on the sale of gasoline and allow counties, and credit to Westchester County, they added their tax in the sales tax holiday. It's not a perfect solution, it's a partial solution. The other thing we've done is try to increase the exemption for people on property tax with higher incomes so that property tax does not continue to be the biggest burden on people living in Westchester in homes. But the fact is, we have to be creative. I think we're going to have to go after those that are making a significant profit by keeping their prices high or raising their prices, and work with our federal partners, which I am very committed to do, partners of any political party, to ensure that we do as much as a federal government to address inflation. Inflation is a huge challenge to the people in this district.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murtha?
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of what my opponent said there. Inflation is indeed an international phenomenon. We have limited ability to affect that. What we do have the ability to do is mitigate its impact that is really crushing the people of Westchester County. Cost of living is cited as one of the biggest things that drive people out. And let's face it, that affects people's quality of life. A suspension, a holiday of the gas tax is great. I would like to see that made permanent. That is something I would vote for. You know, we do pay the highest property taxes in the country here in Westchester. It's a significant issue. I would look for opportunities to cut that wherever we could. In addition, we do have policies here in New York State that make some of the basic things people need more expensive. I mean, take a look. I mean, do you remember your home heating bills when they arrived last winter? They were a shock. There are things that we can be doing in this state, prudent measures that can help ease that burden. And that is something that I would also make a point of trying to get done. Hey, look, you know, Westchester's a wonderful place. I grew up here. We want people to stay. And in order to do that, we do have to come up with solutions to reduce taxes and the cost of living as it pertains to the basic goods that people have in whatever capacity we have the ability to do it.
Thank you very much. Next question. The Equal Rights Amendment, which adds ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, and sex, including pregnancy and pregnancy outcomes, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression to the list of classes protected against discrimination, completed its first passage in the legislature this summer. If elected, how would you vote on this amendment? And Mr. Murtha, you are first.
Yes, thank you. We all stand for equal protection for these rights. My understanding is that the New York Constitution goes along with the United States Constitution with the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protections Clause. Regarding this, it's interesting. To me, this bill does not do what it purports to. I mean, on one hand, it's standing up for equal rights in a way, but if you take a look at some of the language in this, it's really a very radical overhaul of the way our legal system works and our relationship with the government. It talks about discrimination against these groups. It says that discrimination can be any government action, and that means laws that had what's called a disparate impact on any group. I mean, can you think of any law that doesn't have some disparate impact between groups? This is, I think, a major divergence when it comes to the way people on my side of the aisle and people on the other side of the aisle view these issues. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are noble principles and they're important principles. But when it comes to the law, we need to have a different standard. That standard should be equality before the law, and not merely if it results in some different things and assuming that that has to be the result of a bad law. It says that it protects against only intentional discrimination, but if you assume that any different outcome is evidence of discrimination de facto, well, then you basically radically overhauled our relationship with the government. This is not good for New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murtha. Senator Mayer?
Well, I couldn't disagree more with my opponent, and I was a proud co-sponsor of this amendment, which passed the legislature once, needs to pass again, and then go to the people for a vote. And why? Because after the Dobbs decision, when the right to abortion was removed from a presumption of constitutionality by this Supreme Court, New York State has to put into its state constitution to protect the right to abortion. We have done it in our statutes, that's our laws under the Reproductive Health Act, but the fact is a different legislature and perhaps a different governor, even though some people say otherwise, could change what is in the law. But the Constitution is the ultimate protection. There we are saying, New York State, we are going to protect the constitutional right to abortion as it was defined in Roe versus Wade, and the other categories, which were carefully negotiated to be acceptable to many parties, set a standard where New York is in the lead for protecting all under its state constitution and giving rise to a constitutional claim, just a claim. You don't win. You have the opportunity to bring a constitutional claim once this passes, and I hope it does.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murtha, you want to do a rebuttal here? You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Yes, I've heard people refer to this as enshrining abortion in the New York Constitution. I've read this bill. I don't even remember seeing the word abortion in the bill. Maybe it's there once or twice. To me, what I believe this is frankly a rather cynical attempt on people on the other side of the aisle to frighten people into believing their rights are under attack, using something they know is very emotional. Basically, it's what I said it was. This is a radical agenda trying to rewrite our relationship with the state. It's not about abortion.
Thank you. Next question. What campaign finance reforms do you support? And how does your current campaign reflect your commitment to those changes? Senator Mayer, you have the floor.
Well, I have supported public financing of campaigns. It's a challenging subject, but on the other hand, in order to get away from the need to both raise money and raise money from a wide variety of sources, and continue to have a ethical way of governing, we should move to public financing. The system in the city of New York has had many difficulties. We've adopted a modest public financing situation in New York moving forward. But I think the challenge is that until that is changed, candidates that want to win to do the right thing, not just to win to gain power, have to raise money from all sources, have to be clear that raising money does not impact the decision-making we make. I raise money from people who have opposed me. I raise money from people who do not like me or do not support me. I raise money in order to run a strong campaign, to be on the ground, and to participate fully in the communities that I serve. And I make no apologies until the law is changed, but we should have public financing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murtha?
Yeah, I got to tell you, when it comes to campaign finance reform, and you asked me to invoke my own campaign, I'm largely funding it myself. I wish I had so many people giving me money that this was a really big issue for my personal campaign. If I had more connections and had been doing this longer, I suppose I would. I know we have transparency and we need transparency. Obviously, we need to know who's giving what, and they need to be held accountable. As far as my personal campaign and campaign finance reform, look, the people need a say. I don't like the idea of powerful entities controlling elections because they put lots and lots of money towards one candidate and the other candidate is running on, $50 and trying to cut corners wherever they can. So, I understand there's a balance here. We have to make sure that everybody has a right to support. It's part of your freedom of speech. We need to make sure it's transparent. If there's a way to make it a little more equal, I suppose I'd support that too.
Thank you very much. Next question. If the Clean Water Act, if the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act of 2022 passes, what project within SD 37 would you propose to fund? And Senator Mayer, you're first.
Well, I sort of don't accept the premise. There's plenty of money, $2.4 billion in it. And I would fight for every community in our district to get the money. Last night, together with my colleague, Assemblyman Steve Otis, we had a detailed conversation about this to educate people the importance of supporting this amendment. For so many of the towns, villages, and cities that I currently represent that were devastated by Hurricane Ida, this is the path forward. They're all scurrying around looking for money to improve their infrastructure, their sewage, their dams, their houses that have been flooded out. This is the source of money to have this publicly funded, borrowed money spread out over a long period of time it is divided into segments so that there is money for infrastructure. There is money for communities in particular need. There is money for buying out houses like we have in Rybrook that are not going to be salvageable again. There is money for the village of Mamaroneck. There is going to be money for the village of the town of Harrison. All of these communities do not have access to the capital investment needed in order to truly improve our infrastructure to deal with climate change and the likelihood of additional flooding. I think of my city of Yonkers. All of these are extremely expensive projects. This bond act will allow all of our municipalities to move forward, both inland flooding and along the Sound.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Murtha?
Hi, yes, would you mind repeating the question, please?
Okay. If the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act of 2022 passes, what project within SD 37 would you propose to fund?
Well, I think that my opponent made some excellent points there. The name of it is the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, but you see just how far it spreads. This points out a couple of things to me. And I'm an outsider. I'm not used to being inside Albany and seeing how all these things break down. But it does occur to me that a lot of times things get named one thing and then do very different things. Now, in this case, this sounds like a very worthwhile endeavor. First of all, we need clean air and clean water. That ought to go without saying. That has to be the case. In addition, honestly, as my opponent said, the flooding issue, if we have the opportunity to use this to address the infrastructure around preventing that in the future, that is absolutely a priority for me. We have seen what flooding has done to this community, whether you're in Rybrook or Mamaroneck, Central Avenue. It's horrible. It's driving our property values down, but it's creating tragedies and actually taking people's lives. So anything that can focus on flood mitigation is something that I would fully support. In fact, that's one of my priorities.
Thank you very much. Next question. What is the role of the legislature in addressing the phenomenon of mass shootings, and what measures, if any, would you support? And you begin, Mr. Murtha.
Yeah, we've all seen this in the news and it's horrible. You know, when it comes to shootings and gun violence, the mass shootings get the most headlines. They're not the most harmful in terms of our everyday impact. Most shootings are gang related and tend to involve mental illness and addiction. So, you know, there are common sense things we can do. We all want to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands of people who would use them for evil. So I do support appropriate background checks. I think that we need to put people in a position to flag potentially dangerous individuals. But when it comes to the subject of gun violence, I do believe that a lot of times we're getting focused on something which, as horrible and as spectacular as it's made out in the media, is not what affects us every day. And I'd like to focus on the crime we're seeing on our streets in New York City, because I'll just give you an example. I have somebody very close to me who is an actor, and they commute to the city, and he's on a set. He's not going to go back. He's not going back. And the reason why is because he said every single week, somebody, a cast or a crew member, has been assaulted and mugged either on the subway or getting to the subway. So that's where my focus lies, although I do support common sense measures to help prevent some of the horrible things we've seen.
Thank you very much. Senator Mayer.
Well, I respectfully think my opponent has just totally missed the boat. There is a crisis of gun violence. We saw people shot in a supermarket in the middle of the day in Buffalo, right in our state, not in our district, but in our state, by a person who was under 21 with a semi-automatic rifle. We saw what happened in Uvalde. We have a responsibility as elected officials, not just to talk about what happens in our district and legitimate concerns about crime in New York City and elsewhere. We have to tackle gun violence, and we have done very a good job. We have more to do. And frankly, we need a federal ban on assault weapons. And until we have that, we will always be fighting an uphill battle. But let's talk about what we did. After Uvalde and after Buffalo, we passed one of the most important things to many of the Republican women in my district. That was prohibiting those who are under the age of 21 from getting a semi-automatic rifle, like the kid in Uvalde, like the kid in Buffalo, like a lot of other of these young men who have engaged in these mass shootings. That was a powerful message. We also imposed stronger rules on guns. Now, unfortunately, the Supreme Court struck down the concealed carry law in New York that has been in place for 100 years, and we had to deal with it. We dealt with it the best we could, trying to be consistent with the Supreme Court's directives. Part of it has been struck down. We'll see what happens, but we have a responsibility on guns to stand up and be loud and clear about it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murtha, you want a rebuttal?
Yeah, I must
You have 30
respectfully
seconds,
disagree that I am the one missing the boat. The incident in Buffalo was tragic. That's one incident. We have people being shot every day in Westchester County or New York City. It's much closer to home than that. And that's not getting the attention it deserves. And frankly, that's what's affecting our people every day when they go in and out of the city. If she wants to focus on Uvalde, Texas, and people in other states, that's fine. My focus is on the people that live in District 37.
Thank you. Next question. What is the role of the state government in reducing crime, particularly in urban settings? And Mr. Murtha, you're first.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening, or pardon me, the first question, there's no more fundamental duty than focusing on making our streets safe. The role is to do a few things. One, cashless bail has caused great harm. There's no doubt about it. When you release violent people over and over again, they're going to do bad things. I think that we have promoted a culture of lawlessness, frankly. And one thing about human beings is they will get away with as much as you let them get away with. Do you know that as we speak right now, the people of Rye are dealing with gangs coming over from New Jersey? It's like gang tourism. They're coming over from New Jersey in order to boost cars and steal in the Rye neighborhood. We have made ourselves a target with our lapse and frankly, way off the mark crime policies. We need to restore judges' discretion. We need to make sure we are supporting our police, and we need to promote a culture of the most basic common sense things, such as we have to follow the law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murtha. Senator Mayer.
Well, one, first, let's start with empathetic listening. People are legitimately concerned, particularly about the New York City subway. I think that is a problem in and of itself. I commend Mayor Adams and the governor for allocating additional money for overtime. I'm for additional plainclothes police officers in the subway and for additional resources for those who are persistently mentally ill and live in the subway. We have a challenge there. Okay, we have a challenge. We need to deal with it. With respect to bail, which somehow has become the whipping child of all faults of increased criminal activity, I have supported the two changes that I mentioned, which are significant and deal with repeat offenders. I happen to think that we should make additional changes in restoring certain crimes to a list that a judge can not only set bail, but remand, which is really the issue, because bail is intended to ensure you show up for trial, whereas remand is when there's a serious threat to others. And I think we need to examine that and see if we have the correct bucket, which I don't think we do, of crimes that can be considered. So I think we have to work with our police. I'm a strong supporter of police. I'm endorsed by every major police union in Westchester, as well as at the state level. And I insist that the police be part of the conversation, as well as I would add that the Office of Court Administration and our district attorneys. We've got a lot of players in order to solve this problem, but let's be smart and reasonable in doing so.
Thank you very much. Next question. What is your position on the state government's role in ensuring a supply of affordable housing? And Senator Mayer, you are first.
I think affordable housing for Westchester is a crisis. You know, County Executive Latimer did a report early in his term showing the real shortage of affordable housing. And as someone who has been in the legislature, prior to COVID, this was the #1 complaint of my office, trying to find people who were working frequently at 1 or 2 minimum wage jobs, the opportunity to continue to live here. I was not in support of the accessory dwelling unit the way it was proposed last year, but I think there are incentives for municipalities to find ways to build more affordable housing, to set aside units in new developments, and to encourage voluntary accessory dwelling units, as well as transit-oriented development. But the fact is the state made a substantial investment in building affordable housing last year under Governor Hochul's leadership, and the legislature is going to always argue for more. We need additional affordable housing. You can't find an apartment that will be affordable in most of the communities I represent if you have a minimum wage job. And yet Westchester used to be the place you could move on your way up the ladder to the middle class. We won't be that if we don't have affordable housing.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Murtha?
Yeah, I agree with much of what my opponent said there. I've mentioned cost of living a few times. It's something that I am dedicated to helping wherever I can, and that means affordable housing as well. I think that we have vehicles available to us to do that, and we need to make sure we're using them correctly. We need market rate housing. We need affordable rate housing. And to me, that looks like a partnership between private and public, and using tax abatements as an incentive to help give people reasons to do this. And I would absolutely encourage that and support that 100%. We need our people to stay, and that means everybody, wherever you fall on the economic spectrum. One thing that I want to make sure gets included in this conversation is a concept called home rule. For those of you watching who are not familiar with it, it's part of our New York State Constitution. I tell you, it's amazing the stuff you learn when you decide to run for office, all the stuff you didn't even know. I recommend it sometime, to be quite frank with you. It basically boils down to this: a principle that local decisions need to be made by the government that is accessible to and familiar with the people. And that means towns should control what happens within their towns. Albany or the federal government literally do not have the right, according to our Constitution, to come in and make those changes. We do have to do better. And I would meet with anybody and invite anybody. Hey, if you're watching this right now, if you want to talk to me this week, that's something that I want to do something about for sure.
Thank you very much. All right, next question. what solutions would you propose to address shortages in affordable childcare? Mr. Murtha, you are first.
Oh, gosh. It's interesting. I don't have a lot of thoughts on this matter. I do know that we've mentioned pre-K and other things, in the course of these debates. Giving people childcare at an early age. Look, we want to make sure that we're giving families and both parents an opportunity to get into the workforce, earn a better living so that they can, bring in the income to lead a better life. I would be supportive, particularly in the case of people who have very disadvantaged homes, who are single parent homes, of instituting and basically subsidizing types of childcare, and that includes pre-K education. I want to be careful about this issue, though, because if you look at the research on this, the research is very mixed, and there's actually a real downside to childcare. I can speak to this in part as somebody with a background in psychology. There's a lot of studies that indicate that childcare at an early age is something that leads to poor outcomes in terms of aggression and anxiety later in life. You can look at the Quebec family policy. You can look at a number of other studies that are out there that point to this. So I would support interventions to help people get the childcare they need. But I've also heard a scuttlebutt that people are trying to implement universal pre-K for people the age of 4. And I think that that is something that's a bit more nuanced than than most people actually know about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murtha. Senator Mayer.
Well, Marcia, let me answer your question directly. We already did a huge investment last year. I've been fighting on this issue since the 80s, and I take issue with this theory that childcare leads to aggression or whatever the data that my opponent wants to cite. The fact is, for working parents, particularly working mothers, and we saw it in COVID and post-COVID, without affordable, accessible, high-quality childcare, they simply cannot go to work, and they need to. So here's what we actually did this year. We invested $7 billion over 4 years to expand childcare in a number of ways. We increased childcare vouchers for those whose incomes need supplementing to afford childcare. We increased the income eligibility threshold for childcare subsidies to 300% of the federal poverty level. We increased the childcare market rate. That's how childcare providers are reimbursed by the state. And we added a childcare capital program. And we are committed to providing that those who work in childcare, one of the most difficult and important professions, should be paid a better wage than they are now. They need to be paid a living wage and a wage that reflects the value of their work. I will continue to be a champion for childcare because, honestly, childcare in the rest of the world is a given so that people can work, particularly mothers. I don't want to get into the conversation about full day pre-K for 4-year-olds. I'm a strong proponent, as my conference is, but on childcare, I am all in, and we have done a great deal. We have more to do.
Thank you very much. Were you asking for a rebuttal at the beginning? No. Okay, it's all right. So thank you very much. Next question. What legislation would you propose to address the rise in mental health issues affecting SD 37 and the state as a whole? Senator Mayer, you're first.
Well, one of the first things I would do is support the bill by my colleague, Senator Pete Harkin, who was the chair of the Committee on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse, to get rid of the silos in state government of having 2 separate agencies, one that deals with mental health and one that deals with alcoholism and substance abuse. There are 2, these are actually intertwined areas, and they ought to be talking to each other and have a single agency. We passed his bill in the Senate, did not pass in the Assembly. I'm a strong supporter of that. Secondly, we need additional resources, certainly in the school community, and I have fought for mental health services. Pre-COVID, I got 10 million added to the budget for school mental health, and this year, obviously more, but it wasn't enough, and we will need more. So what we need for children, in my opinion, is all of the things that help children recover from the damages of COVID, particularly hybrid and remote learning and school closures, which clearly had impact that we have to deal with. And a lot of it is mental health, not always at an acute crisis stage, But prior to acute crisis, the Rye City School District and many others are using the money they got from the state and the federal government to do very creative work in ensuring every student has access to quality mental health. We need that for students, and we need more investment in the state's mental health system so that the kind of people that we see on the street that we know need treatment can get it and can get it promptly.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murtha?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Frankly, we have a mental health crisis, especially with our kids. They have never been more isolated, more anxious, and more depressed. Incidents of self-harm have gone up dramatically. Incidences of attempted suicide and suicidal ideation is off the charts. Okay. That is in large part due to COVID. I actually think it's more in large part due to our response to COVID, which unnecessarily put them in that position at a lot of times. So one of the things I would absolutely support is more mental health counseling in school, more check-ins. That goes a long way, and our kids need it. Another thing is, look, and this is, we're talking about mental health, but when we're talking about mental health, we're also talking about crime, right? I've got experience in this area. I've worked inpatient at psychiatric centers with inmates. Basically, well, they were former inmates. The ward that I worked on were people who were actually too mentally unstable to be housed at Attica. Okay, these were highly disturbed, highly dangerous people. What we need to do is make sure we're funding the beds. We have to have the beds available so that we can house people and get them the care they need. We can't forget about the people who are suffering, whether they're criminals or not. We need to get them the help they need, and that means funding the beds, and I would support that because it solves crime, or doesn't solve it, but it certainly helps a lot. And that's what I do.
Thank you very much. Now we have the final question. And that is, what is the most important political lesson to be learned from the past 2 years? Mr. Murtha.
Oh, gosh. For me, it would be the need for balance in a legislature. Like I said, I grew up in New York. This is a blue state. And that's great. I love New York. I moved back here on purpose, but it used to be a livable blue state. And we've made it highly unlivable for many people. Now, a lot of people might not know this. Despite being Democratic down the line now and known for that, there was a little outpost which actually was Republican. It was the state Senate. For most of the last few decades, Republicans have actually held a majority in the state Senate. And that was really, really important because it helped add some moderation to the legislature, right? It helped dull some of the sharper edges. It mitigated more extreme policies, and it got your voice in the room. So I think you've seen what's happened, frankly, in the last 4 years since that's been reversed. That Republican majority has become a super minority. And when that happened, frankly, we lost all checks, balances, and accountability for our government. So I like to think of it this way. There are paths, politically speaking, that lead more to the left. There are paths that lead more to the right. And either one of them can work just fine, but you have to have guardrails. We need to put those guardrails back. The lesson I've learned is that without guardrails, you go right off a cliff. And by the way, I mean either party. I'm not trying to make this partisan. It doesn't matter who you are.
Thank you very much. Senator Mayer, you would like to have a 30-second rebuttal before you, okay.
Thank you.
Please,
Exactly. Before
30 seconds.
So first place, let's talk about what happened when the Senate Republicans were in charge of the Senate. The Reproductive Health Act, simply moving the right to abortion from the penal law to the public health law, was blocked. The marriage equality, blocked. The ability to expand voting, to have early voting, to have absentee voting, blocked. The ability to do major climate change like the CLCPA, path-breaking, nation-breaking law on climate change, blocked by the Republicans. So I don't think they were a bulwark against extremism. They were a block against good progressive legislation.
Thank you. So, and now you have 1.5 minutes to answer the question. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, that would be good.
Okay. What is the most important political lesson to be learned from the past 2 years? Go ahead, Senator Mayer.
Well, I think there are several. One is that we need to remind ourselves that it was a period of unknown science, and people were doing the best they could, particularly in government, relying on scientists that had the expertise and the judgment that we felt confident with. People may have disagreed, but there was not a uniformity of views. And so the state government relied largely on the CDC in making decisions. Did I agree with them all? No. Did I argue with them? Yes. Did I understand that they were made in good faith and not for evil purposes? Absolutely. And I think what happened, and it is a lesson to be learned, in my opinion, is that people turned their frustration and understandable upset with the length of the virus and the length of the COVID shutdown to become uglier, angrier, intolerant, less empathetic of those who are older, those who are sicker, those who needed additional care, those for whom we should put aside our own views sometimes to make sure they are safe. And I found that in my work as a senator. I found that in my life. I think we have become angrier, uglier, and less tolerant. And I think that's a very unfortunate lesson we have learned.
Thank you very much. That is the end of the questions. Thank you very much to the candidates. Now we will proceed to the closing statements. As I said earlier, closing statements will be given in the reverse order of the opening statements. Each candidate will have up to 1.5 minutes to make their closing statement. And Senator Mayer, you are first.
Thank you so much, Marcia, and thank you to the League for the opportunity to be here. I think it's clear after hearing both of us that I have the experience, the record of achievement, and the understanding of the state legislative process, as well as independent thinking, that makes me the better candidate for this job. Let's be clear, it's a tough time to run for office given the divisions that plague our nation. But for me, it's the most important time because after what we have accomplished and the challenges we face, I feel I am up to this challenge. First, we have to push forward on education. We have to help students recover from the impact of COVID, the loss of socialization, the decline in test scores, and the need for mental health, as we've discussed. We need more teachers, more investment in CTE, and a new way to measure need for how the state pays for public school. And we need childcare, pre-K and after school, as well as art, music, and sports in every school. That's going to be one of my priorities. On criminal justice reform, frankly, there's a lot of work to do. We pushed through some important improvements, but we need to acknowledge and address the fears and concerns that many of our constituents have voiced by modifying and improving the laws that need change. We have to support law enforcement, give them a seat at the table, but at the same time, let's push for best practices in policing, the end of racial disparities in our system, and an open dialogue. In conclusion, I'm a strong independent voice for the communities and our county. I'll work with anyone who has a good idea, as I have in my life, but I'll stick to my values, my integrity, and my work ethic to make sure at the end our government works for everyone, not just some of us.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murtha?
Yes, thank you. Once again, thank you to the League of Women Voters and to my opponent for agreeing to join us in this forum. You know, not everybody was afforded that entitlement, frankly. You know, you've gotten a chance, folks, to hear both of us. You've heard what my opponent's priorities are, and you've heard what mine are. Mine are, quite simply, increasing public safety, reducing cost of living, and getting our kids a better education. There is so much more to talk about on those subjects. This is a wonderful forum. It's not a forum that allows you to say all the things that need to be said. I hope we can do more. I would just ask you this: what are your major priorities? When you wake up in the morning, when you go about your business, you go to work, you have dinner with your family, where are your priorities? Where do they lie? What's going to be needed to make your quality of life better? I can only speak for myself, but I can tell you they revolve around the things that I was talking about. And so I'm not going to take my eye off the ball. I'm going to focus on it. You know, I do not have a background in politics, but what I do have are a very particular set of skills. And I will listen and work with anybody who can increase positive change in the lives of the people in District 37. reach out with any questions. I will answer them. And thank you.
Thank you very much for your closing statements. Now, we thank both the candidates and the audience. A reminder that this forum is being recorded and it will be available to you on the sponsoring league's websites until Election Day, which is November 8th. I also want to remind you of the unique and important role played by the League of Women Voters here in the community and across the country. The League works to register voters, educate them on the issues of the day, and to protect their right to vote. Your local league is made up of volunteers who devote their time and energy. Your participation and assistance is always welcome. And now some information about voting in the election. Early voting takes place from Saturday, October 29th through November 6th. Voters may vote at any of the polling places listed on the screen. The early voting polling locations can be found at the Westchester Board of Elections website or using the QR code. Election Day is November 8th. On Election Day, you can vote only at your assigned polling location. To confirm your polling location, you can visit vote411.org or the New York State Board of Elections website to use their voter lookup service. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.